There's a place on the internet where people share their most disturbing experiences, not horror stories crafted for entertainment, but real accounts from ordinary people who stumbled into situations they can't explain. These are the threads that keep you scrolling past midnight, where each update makes your stomach drop a little further. Today, we're diving into some of the most unsettling mysteries ever posted to Reddit. Stories where the answers are sometimes worse than the questions. What you're about to hear might make you look at your own home differently. The first story starts innocently enough. Someone comes home from work on a Friday afternoon, ready to relax for the weekend. But instead of the quiet house they left that morning, they find their front door standing wide open. No broken locks, no shattered windows, nothing that would suggest a forced entry. It's almost like someone simply walked in and forgot to close the door behind them. Walking through the house, everything appears normal at first. The TV is still there, laptop untouched, money sitting exactly where it was left. But then the small details start adding up. 3 wet footprints in the kitchen, small ones like a child had walked through a puddle before coming inside. A strange smell lingering in the air, something like tobacco mixed with pond water. 2 bedroom light bulbs mysteriously burnt out, even though they're high-quality LEDs that should last for years. And the cat, usually friendly and curious, is hiding under the bed, absolutely terrified. The homeowner calls the police, files a report, tries to make sense of what happened. Maybe someone got startled and ran off before taking anything. Maybe it was just a weird coincidence. But then they talk to the neighbor, and the situation takes a darker turn. The neighbor mentions seeing the family over earlier that day. There was no family visit. He describes hearing a little girl screaming and crying in the backyard for at least 10 minutes before going silent. The problem is, there's no way for a child to get into that backyard. It's completely fenced off, heavily gated, and the homeowner has no children, no family even living in the same state. The fear sets in immediately. This isn't just a random break-in anymore. Someone was in that house, possibly with a child, doing something they desperately wanted to keep hidden. The homeowner installs security cameras, changes the locks, tries to move on with life. For months, everything seems fine. The dread fades, replaced by the assumption that it was a one-time incident, something weird but ultimately harmless. Then the feeling comes back. It starts as a vague unease, that sensation of being watched when you're alone. Hair standing up on the back of your neck when you walk to the kitchen at night. Small things moving around the house. Toilet paper rolls placed neatly on the floor instead of on the holder. Food disappearing from the pantry. The girlfriend's underwear vanishes from the laundry, nowhere to be found even after tearing apart the washing machine. The cat becomes increasingly stressed, refusing to use her litter box, acting relieved every time her owner comes home. At 3:30 in the morning, one of the security cameras finally captures something. A person rides a bicycle up to the front gate, stops, and waits. 30 seconds later, a second person jumps over the locked gate from the inside, landing with a bicycle and a backpack. They ride away together into the darkness. The homeowner checks every room, every closet, every possible hiding spot. Nothing is missing. The tools in the garage are all there, the electronics untouched. Even an Amazon package sitting outside is left completely alone. What kind of intruder breaks in and steals nothing? Looking at the camera setup reveals the horrifying answer. Only one camera was triggered, the one facing the driveway. The other cameras covering the backyard and garage never activated. That means the second person came from a blind spot, somewhere the cameras couldn't see. Following that blind spot leads to a crawl space entrance under the house, and the gate covering it has been bent back and broken open. someone had been living under the house, accessing the interior through floor panels in the bedroom closets, coming and going as they pleased for months, possibly longer. The post ends there. The homeowner says they're filing another police report, sleeping with a loaded weapon, trying to process the violation of having a stranger living beneath them. They promise updates as the situation develops, but 7 years pass and nothing. No follow-up, no resolution, no explanation for who was down there or why they chose that house. The account goes silent, leaving everyone wondering what happened when the police finally investigated that crawl space. But that kind of sudden change in someone's behavior isn't always caused by an outside threat. Sometimes the danger comes from the person you trust most, and it happens so gradually you don't realize something's wrong until it's almost too late. That's what happened to a woman whose husband started experiencing what she describes as increasingly concerning behavior. At first, it seems manageable, maybe just stress from work or a rough patch in the relationship. He mentions an old email account with an inheritance that got hacked, something he's never brought up in their 12 years together. He starts believing everyone is talking about him, that there's some massive conspiracy involving his wife, his co-workers, even strangers. She convinces him to go to the hospital, hoping they'll recognize the severity of his mental state. Instead, they give him medication and send him home with instructions to take it regularly. The problem is he smokes cannabis daily and refuses to quit, and the medication doesn't mix well with that. His behavior escalates rapidly. He asks about a show they're supposedly on, demands to know how much money she's being paid to keep secrets. He accuses her of taking secret phone calls, insists he's seen her come back crying from conversations that never happened. Whenever she tries to explain that none of this is real, he gets angry, tells her she's lying, warns that something bad will happen if she doesn't tell him the truth. The delusions consume his entire life. He stops going to work, spending his days at the police station trying to file reports about the conspiracy against him. Eventually, his employer fires him, and they call for a wellness check because they're genuinely afraid he might come back and hurt someone. The police show up, talk to him while his wife is present, and he assures them he would never hurt anyone unless acting in self-defense. But at home, away from the authorities, his behavior becomes more volatile. He screams at her, demanding answers to questions that have no answers because the situations he's describing never happened. Then he goes completely silent, refusing to interact with her or their 2 young children for days at a time. One afternoon, she suggests taking the kids to a nearby playground, trying to inject some normalcy into their lives. He agrees but barely speaks during the walk, ignoring both her and the children. At the playground, she asks if they should let the kids play for a few minutes. He explodes, accusing her of always controlling everything, of being the queen of all decisions. When she points out that she only asked a question, he tells her to do whatever she wants, like always. While she plays with the kids, he throws a football in her direction, and it flies past her head by just a couple feet. She asks why he did that, and his response chills her to the bone. He says if he wanted to hit her in the head, he would have thrown it that way. The ride home is when everything falls apart. He gets in the car uninvited, and when she tells him she doesn't want him there because he's being cruel, he says he could be a lot meaner. As she drives, he continues his usual rants about the conspiracy, about everyone lying to him. She tells him she doesn't want to hear it, and he screams at her to shut up and keep driving. When she stops the car and tells him to get out, he makes a motion like he's going to punch her, stopping his fist inches from her face. She starts crying, yelling at him to leave, and he refuses. She threatens to drive him to the police station, and he tells her he'll choke her unconscious before they get there. That threat, made in front of their children, becomes the breaking point. She takes him home, and he immediately starts questioning how long she's been planning to leave him, who she's replacing him with, taunting her in a mocking voice about going to the police. She writes a post asking for help, unsure if she's dealing with a manic episode, psychosis, or something else entirely. The comments overwhelmingly point to cannabis-induced psychosis or early onset schizophrenia, conditions that can be triggered by heavy marijuana use, especially in people genetically predisposed to mental health issues. The age range fits perfectly, as men in their mid-30s often experience the first severe symptoms of these conditions. She leaves the house that night but returns the next day to gather evidence, knowing her husband downplays his symptoms to authority figures. She records their conversations, capturing him threatening to hit her, to slap her, demanding she bring anyone talking about him to the house so he can take care of them himself. The following morning, he insists on driving her to work, and during the ride, he grabs her by the back of the neck, pulling her closer while calling her stupid and other insults, accusing her of keeping his inheritance from him. She tells him he desperately needs help, then immediately goes to her boss and then to the police station. The sergeant initially seems reluctant to file a report, concerned about making her husband homeless, treating him like the victim. She has to insist that her safety and her children's safety matter more. They finally take her statement, and officers arrest him 5 hours later. He's compliant during the arrest, and with all the information she provided about his mental state, they take him directly to the hospital for a 30-day psychiatric hold. He faces charges for uttering threats and assault, though she suspects he'll get minimal consequences given his lack of criminal record. The first update brings hope. After treatment and stopping cannabis use, he seems to return to normal. He explains that he genuinely believed he was on something like The Truman Show, that everyone was watching him and plotting against him. She gives him another chance, wanting to believe the person she married is still in there somewhere. But a year later, the final update arrives. He stopped taking his medication, started using again, and fell back into psychosis. This time, he attempts to strangle her when she disputes his delusions. A protective order keeps him away from her and the children, and she hasn't heard from him since. Her closing words serve as a warning to anyone in a similar situation. Don't trust that someone will get better when they haven't proven reliable in any part of their life, and don't try to fix people who can't be fixed. Living with someone means trusting them with your space, your belongings, your safety. But what happens when you realize the person you've been living with has been keeping an enormous secret, something that changes everything you thought you knew about them? A man discovered this after 5 years with his girlfriend, 3 of those years spent living together in her house. They decided to replace the flooring in one of the neglected rooms, and immediately his girlfriend started acting strange. She insisted he leave the house, said she'd handle calling someone to do the work, became defensive when he offered to help with his own contractor connection. He wanted to be helpful, so while she was out helping her brother with his car, he went to clear out the room in preparation for the flooring work. Pulling back the carpet revealed grooves in the floor and a fold-out handle. Opening it exposed a ladder descending at least 10 feet into darkness. On the back of the door, written in his girlfriend's handwriting, was a note about the last time this space was checked, dated 3 years ago. She knew about this room, had been maintaining it, and never said a word. Unable to resist, he climbed down to investigate. At the bottom, he found a bathroom, complete with toilet, sink, and checkered tile, surprisingly clean and well maintained. But that wasn't all. Beyond the bathroom was another room, and this one was stocked like a survival bunker, medical kits, books, a massive box filled with rations, gallons of water, a cot, all relatively new. The amount of supplies seemed impossible to carry down a ladder, suggesting either incredible effort over time or another entrance he hadn't found yet. In the wall, a small metal door led to what looked like a crawl space filled with cobwebs, but he decided not to explore further. The next day, his girlfriend suddenly cancelled the flooring project, claiming the contractor said it would be too expensive. He couldn't shake the questions. Why hide a survival bunker from her partner of 5 years? Why maintain it in secret, checking on it regularly without ever mentioning its existence? The comments on his post split into two main theories. Some suggested she was a prepper, someone preparing for disaster scenarios, and felt embarrassed or protective of that part of her life. Others raised darker possibilities, pointing out that rooms like this are sometimes used for trafficking, and the cleanliness suggested recent use. He promised to confront her about it, to ask directly why she kept this enormous secret. But that's where the story ends. 3 years pass with no update, no follow-up, no explanation. His account goes dormant, leaving everyone wondering what conversation happened when he finally asked about the hidden bunker, or if something prevented that conversation from ever taking place. Sometimes the unexplained isn't hidden beneath our homes, but above them. A woman shared her experience of growing up in a house where she was certain someone spent nights on the roof of an addition watching her through her bedroom window. She could hear movement in the darkness, see flashes of light like someone taking photographs. Her mother eventually noticed furniture on the deck had been moved in a way that would allow someone to climb onto the roof. But instead of investigating or calling police, she simply installed blinds and pretended everything was fine. Years later, now 28 and living with her sister and a friend in a house they owned together, she started noticing strange items appearing on the flat roof of their kitchen addition. First, a piece of fried chicken, which seemed odd but explainable since they'd recently had a party. The next day, it was gone. Then a hip bone from a large animal, maybe a deer, appeared on the roof. She made a mental note to remove it, but by the next day, it had been moved to the yard. Most disturbing was the large jug that appeared next, seemingly filled with urine, sitting upright on the roof, as if carefully placed there rather than thrown. The feeling of being watched returned, that same dread from her childhood intensifying every time she entered certain rooms. Her cat became increasingly stressed, and food started disappearing from the house. She set up a camera, trying to catch whatever or whoever was visiting their roof at night. Then her roommate saw it while showering, a face staring directly at her through the bathroom window. She grabbed her phone just in time to snap a picture, and the culprit turned out to be a raccoon, its face peeking up over the window ledge. The relief was immediate, the explanation that the mysterious items were probably raccoons getting into garbage and dragging things onto the roof. But doubt lingered in the comments. Raccoons might explain the food and bones, might even explain the strange movements and sounds. But a jug filled with liquid sitting upright and undisturbed, that seemed less like wildlife and more like someone spending time on that roof, someone who needed a place to relieve themselves during long periods of watching. In a sketchy neighborhood, with 3 young women living alone, the raccoon explanation felt almost too convenient, like something you'd want to believe because the alternative was too disturbing to accept. The final story might seem less personally threatening at first, but it sparked one of the most intense Reddit responses ever documented. A college student in northern Utah visited a friend's house, a quaint and normal-looking place about 5 miles from campus. While exploring, they discovered something unusual in the crawl space: 3 metal boxes encased in 18 inches of concrete with cinder blocks stacked on top. Sitting on top of this concrete slab was a lid bearing a radioactive warning label. The student took pictures and posted them online, asking what they'd found. The response was immediate and alarming. People with expertise in hazardous materials and nuclear waste started flooding the comments with warnings. The label indicated Group 1 or 2 radioactive materials, some of the most dangerous types. Commenters explained that anything requiring that much concrete shielding should never be in a residential area, that if the source containers were leaking, there could be serious contamination throughout the house. They urged the student to stop going into the crawl space, to take a shower, to call police immediately. The situation was being treated as a genuine emergency by people who understood exactly what those warning labels meant. Instead of following this advice, the student posted a casual update saying they'd forwarded the information to their friend who owned the house, and then announced they were heading into the mountains for the day, where they'd be out of cell phone range. The audacity of this decision stunned everyone watching the thread unfold. Someone potentially exposed to dangerous radiation decides to disappear into wilderness instead of seeking medical attention. Meanwhile, concerned Redditors started contacting authorities themselves, reaching out to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, local police, hazmat teams, anyone who might be able to respond to what appeared to be an orphaned radioactive source. By the time the student returned from their mountain adventure, multiple federal agencies were already involved. The NRC had contacted the friend directly, and arrangements were being made for an emergency inspection. The student seemed annoyed by what they viewed as Reddit overreacting, posting updates that minimized the situation and dismissed people's genuine concern for their safety. They admitted to handling the radioactive lid for several minutes, fondling it while trying to figure out what it was, completely unaware of the potential danger. The investigation happened quickly. A 3-person team from the Utah Department of Environmental Quality showed up with radiation detection equipment, spent hours taking readings and collecting samples from throughout the house. Their conclusion surprised everyone who'd been following the saga. The boxes contained nothing, just empty space with a piece of thin sheetrock in one of them. No radioactive materials, no dangerous contamination, only natural trace amounts of radon that exist in most homes. The lid with the warning label was determined to be from the late 1950s and completely unrelated to the concrete vault. The team had no explanation for why someone built a vault under the house, suggesting it might have been for storing valuables. The student's final update was dismissive of everyone who'd expressed concern, thanking the genuinely helpful commenters while criticizing others for being high and mighty. They seemed frustrated that the situation caused their friend to miss work and deal with stress over what turned out to be nothing dangerous. But reading between the lines reveals something important about how we respond to potential threats. Yes, Reddit overreacted in some ways, with thousands of people making reports to various agencies, but that response came from a place of genuine concern from people who understood that orphaned radioactive sources have killed before, that mishandling such materials can have devastating consequences. The student was lucky. The materials were gone, the vault was empty, and no one was harmed. But that luck doesn't diminish the seriousness of what could have happened. Opening a container marked with radiation warnings, handling it extensively before understanding what it might contain, then leaving for the wilderness instead of seeking medical evaluation, these were genuinely dangerous choices. The government's rapid response, treating it as a priority event involving multiple federal agencies, wasn't an overreaction. It was the appropriate response to a reported orphaned source, because the alternative, assuming it's probably nothing and doing nothing, that's how people die. These stories share a common thread beyond their mysterious nature. They're about the spaces we think we know, the people we think we understand, and the moment we realize neither is quite what we believed. The person living in a crawl space, visiting your home like it's their own. The partner whose mind fractures in ways you can't predict or control. The secret room maintained for years by someone who shares your bed, the visitor on your roof who might be an animal or might be something much worse, the hazardous materials buried beneath an ordinary house, waiting to be discovered by someone who doesn't understand what they're looking at. What makes these accounts so unsettling isn't just what happened, but what we don't know. Most of these stories end without resolution. We never learn who was living under that house or why they targeted that particular crawl space. We don't know if the woman's husband ever got proper treatment or if he's still out there, trapped in his delusions. The man who found the bunker never tells us what his girlfriend said when confronted, or if he ever got the chance to ask. The raccoon might explain some things on that roof, but not everything. And the questions linger like shadows. Even the radioactive materials story, which got a clear resolution, leaves us wondering what someone was planning with that concrete vault and why they built it in the first place. These are the stories that stick with you, the ones that make you wonder about the spaces in your own home you never check. The crawl spaces and attics and hidden corners where anything could be waiting. They make you question how well you really know the people in your life, what secrets they might be keeping, what changes might be happening in their minds that you haven't noticed yet. And they remind us that sometimes paranoia isn't paranoia at all. Sometimes those feelings of being watched, of something being wrong, of danger lurking just out of sight, sometimes those feelings are exactly right. The question is whether you'll investigate when those feelings arise, or whether you'll be like some of these people living with the unknown because confronting it seems too terrifying to consider. Just remember, the things we don't look for are often the things that find us first.